Okay, today is July the 29th, 2022, and I'm here with Austin Hunt to talk about his experience with the 12-week life transformational program that I have, and he just completed it, I guess, a couple of months ago. And Austin came to me initially as a client a few months ago, and as a result of the time that we've spent together and things we've shared, he's becoming a good friend. So Austin, if you would introduce yourself and, talk about what motivated you to contact me to begin with.
All right. Well, my name's Austin Hunt. And what motivated me was try to address it, just sort of having issues in almost all aspects of life. And ironically, there's a movie that Don recommended, and I kind of felt like the main character in what was the movie called?
School for Scoundrels.
School for Scoundrels. So I kind of feel like, I was the guy on the beach getting the sand kicked in my face all the time. And my wife and I were having problems. And that's really what motivated me was she said I hadn't tried to done anything to help myself. And, even in the movie, it was kind of funny. You get a self-help book, but you got a loser trying to help yourself, so I needed a sort of guidance was one thing. And the good thing about having a life coach is you have like a mentor instructor, but also somebody that holds you accountable. And, I had seen psychiatrists and psychologists before, and I was just very dissatisfied with them. They basically sit there and listen to you talk for an hour, maybe asked a couple questions, and I didn't feel like I was getting any direction, no motivation, no help. And I had 4 encounters that I won't go into, but each one was very bizarre with these psychiatrists, psychologists. And the last one I kind of noticed, I looked at a lot of his books, and it had nothing to do with helping people. It had to do with sexual perversions, and I'm not trying to get into it. And so, if that's what you're thinking about, then that's what everybody has a problem with. And that's not what I had a problem with. I think I had a problem with expressing myself that then manifested in anger. And another thing from the church I go to, they talk a lot about the generational curse. And so that was another reason for me to be motivated, because I didn't want my children to end up in sort of the same situation I was, and that I had seen my father go through as well. And so that's really what made me seek out a life coach, because clearly a psychiatrist or a psychologist, their goal is not to get you better, but bring you back the next week. And so when I joined this, I was happy, because I was given a list of books to read versus just come back next week. And after going 8 or 9 times to one psychiatrist and never having any input, motivation or anything, I was getting frustrated. So I think that was a positive thing. And then again, Don holds you accountable. Sometimes it may not be fun, but that's part of it. And it's good, because that's what a mentor does. They keep you honest, just like a parent keeps you honest, or your minister or your priest, or whoever. And I think those were good qualities. And then the books I read were very helpful, very instructive. And it made me understand some of my behaviors that I couldn't really understand. Probably the most being, I'm having a stroke here for a moment. What is it called? Codependency.
Codependency, yeah.
So, and it kind of, the book that was really good, because it kind of explained where, you're fine. And all of a sudden somebody says something that just sets you off, and everybody's like, what the heck is wrong with you? Why are you so upset? And when you read the book, you kind of understand that you're carrying the past with you. And some of the techniques that Don taught me, when I first did one of them, he'll refer to it as tapping. I thought, well, this is kind of crazy, but I swear to God, it worked. I mean, it really did. And I used to be haunted by some of, or maybe traumatized with post-traumatic stress disorder because of my profession and just interacting with people. And I was kind of haunted by the past, and I don't suffer the past anymore. I don't even think about the past anymore. So that's probably the biggest thing for me. It's given me relief from the past, which is, it can be a very powerful control over you.
Yeah, and you mentioned the reading, and probably what would be useful. There's 5 main components in this 12-week program, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about your experience with each one and the benefits you got, and maybe how they work together, like meditation. I can't remember. Had you ever meditated before?
No, I never meditated before. I thought it was kind of hokey, and So I started to get up at 4 a.m. and we started off, I think it was either 10 or 15 minutes. Then we went up to 30. And with my hyperactivity, I could do about 30 minutes easy. We tried to cut hour and I was able to hold on for a little bit, but 30 minutes was about it. But it actually just relaxing, it allowed me to focus, to sort of, obviously I thought, and I didn't understand meditation, was that no thought was supposed to enter your mind. But instead, what I learned is it sort of allows you to focus on that thought. And it really kind of sets you up in the morning to get going in the right direction. So by meditating, it sort of just puts you in the right frame of mind. Just instead of waking up and thinking about your worries, you just concentrated on some things. And during that time of concentrating exclusively, just trying to focus on breathing, a thought would pop in and there would be a certain amount of clarity that would go with that thought. And I think so it helped me to, one, be more relaxed. It also helped me to inadvertently, sometimes some of my best thoughts came to me during that time of just meditation, because you're at peace and it would pop into your mind, thoughts, revelations, and ideas.
Well, yeah, and, to me, the meditation is sort of like, when we're focusing on a problem in our life and we just are, we're taking a shower or we're jogging or we're doing something totally unrelated to the problem, that sort of frees up our mind. And meditation is sort of a methodical way to do that. And a lot of people, the reason that they don't stick with it is because they have a misunderstanding. They think they're supposed to sit there and be in this blissful state of no thinking, which is not it at all. But yeah, and how about the journaling? How did that work for you?
Well, the journaling was also, and I still do that, it's very helpful because it just sort of lets you write what you're thinking. And it sort of solidifies it. In my time of my education, I always found that rewriting your lecture or writing notes out of a book made it stick in your mind better. And I think that journaling does two things. One, it kind of refocuses your own mind to what you were thinking. And just sometimes writing what you're thinking at the time shocks you because it's sort of a flow of consciousness and you may not be aware of what you're thinking. And the next thing you know, you're writing stuff. And I caught a lot of revelations from the journaling. There was a lot of times where I would have epiphany that had never occurred to me before when I was writing. And then all of a sudden I would recognize, well, okay, that really bothered me, or, I never even thought about that before. And it also sort of, I think, was therapeutic in a way of expressing yourself without having to talk to anybody else. So you could just put down what your thought process was. And then when you go back and look at it, it's kind of shocking how your mind changes over that 12-week course.
Yeah, and then another piece of the journaling in the program, that's sort of a key piece of the program, because every week you would read your journal out loud to me. Mm-hmm. And what was your experience? What was your experience? I'll share my experience in a minute, but what was your experience with, like, during the day, you knew you were going to journal, and then you wrote it down and you got different insights and revelations. And then on our next session, you were reading it out loud to me. What was your experience with that when you read it out loud to another person?
Well, it kind of reveals your thoughts, maybe things you wouldn't say when you're writing the journal, you wouldn't say to other people. So I think it makes you more honest because you're being honest with your journal. And then when you have to read it to somebody, you're really kind of exposing yourself. And then it also shows you what you were thinking. It's sort of a chronological time period of what you were thinking. And that can be shocking because when you're journaling, you may not really be aware of what you're actually thinking at the time. And I might not be describing it the way I want to.
I think that's good.
You're expressing yourself, and then you go back when you read it and like, wow, last week I was really mad about something, or, I was calm and I was happy. And I think it just sort of reinforces it. But I think it shows you your reflection of what you were thinking at the time and how your emotional response was. And I think that lets you understand yourself better. And by understanding yourself better, it lets you control, if that's a right word to use, or maybe master your thoughts and actions better. Because, that's the one thing you tell me is we can't control what pops into our brains, but we can master how we think about it and respond to it. So the idea pops into your mind, but it doesn't mean you have to act or think in it in that way.
Yeah, and from my perspective, when I hear someone read out their journal, then I can see different things and patterns that they might not see. So it's real helpful in doing the work. The journal's sort of a big deal. And you mentioned, one thing while I'm thinking about it is one thing we talked about early on is what's your business and what's not your business. Share how that one thing has impacted your life.
Well, it's actually, there's two things that one is very liberating because there's a couple things Don taught me. And again, the first is our thought affects our emotions, and our emotions affect our behavior. And if you feel you're responsible for everybody and you got to make everybody happy, then you're miserable all the time because nobody's ever happy. I mean, it's a God honest truth. Nobody's happy. And you're not going to make anybody happy. So the first thing is, and it's also, well, so now the first thing is if you accept it, what your business is your business, then you don't have to worry about other people's businesses and you don't have to fix anybody else's problems. And so there you've already liberated a tremendous amount of load off yourself, whether it's for truly altruistic reasons or you're a meddlesome person. Just thinking of it in terms of I'm just responsible for what my business is and nobody else's business is very liberating because you're not responsible for other people. Two, you realize your business is your business. And if somebody doesn't like your business, you're not responsible for how they feel. And that's probably the biggest thing is because most of us go through life feeling like we're obligated to control or make other people happy or not hurt their feelings. And I'm not saying you're mean to people, but you have a right to be happy and you have a right to defend yourself. And I think the classic one was that time that I was at the store and I walked by that lady.
Oh, yeah.
And it was sort of like that movie. So I walked by this lady and she's like, excuse me. And I said, and I was pretty upset at the time because my wife and I were having some problems, potentially divorced. And I was really upset. And I think the look on my face is what offended her because I was sad. And I thought maybe she thought I was giving her dirty look. Well, it turns out she was occupying the whole aisle of the store. And I just tried to sneak past her and that offended her. And at that time, I was early on in my experience with Don. And it's kind of funny, the difference. So I'm apologizing for offending a lady that I had really nothing to do with. And my two daughters defended me and they called her a Karen and they got on her and they were like defending their father, which I'm proud for them that they don't have that type of behavior. I feel like I got to make everybody better, but my business is my business. And I'm just trying to get past you to go shopping. And if you were offended that I passed you, then that's your problem. And so I think that your business is probably the key and the most important thing that you can accept in life because you can't control anything else. And like you even pointed out one time, there's your business, their business, and God's business. And you can't control somebody else's business and you can't control God's business. So all you can do is control yourself and be responsible for that. And it's very liberating because you learn if you listen to Don and control yourself, you don't occupy your life with somebody else. So I'm not going to get involved whether somebody in my office is having a problem with their kid. That's their business. I don't need to know about it.
Right. And how does that affect just, being aware of what's your business and what's not your business? How has that affected your ability to communicate with people?
Well, it's allowed me to be more direct. And, you told one time, you said, you got to be careful because you don't want to go overboard and be too mean, but it's allowed me to stand up for myself. And sometimes I feel like I'm maybe too aggressive, but it really allows you to stand up for yourself and express your own needs and desires and not feel guilty that if somebody is offended by what you want or you need to do. And I think that's the most important thing. I'm an owner of a practice. I want this done. Well, you don't want to do it. Well, it's my business and you're going to do it. Now, I'm not responsible for how you feel. You don't want to do it. Well, then, don't do it. I'll find somebody else. And I'm not asking you to do anything appropriate. I'm just asking you to do what the boss wants. And if you don't want that, and before I couldn't have done that. So it gives you a certain amount of confidence. It also gives you sort of the Monopoly get out of jail free card because you're not responsible for somebody else's feelings. And I think that's the biggest thing is because we all go through life trying not to offend people, or we're taught not to offend people. But at the same time, by not standing up for yourself, you're really kind of sacrificing who you are. You're not being honest to yourself. So in the end, the person that gets hurt the most is yourself. If you're worried about what other people's feelings are. And again, that does mean you're abusive to people, but it means you can express what you want and not feel guilty if somebody else wants you, to do something. And I think that's very important.
And I think, as I recollect, when you filled out the original survey before we even talked, I believe there were several things that you wanted to accomplish. You wanted to be less angry.
Yep.
You wanted to be a better leader. You wanted to be a better husband and father. So how does that impact? How have you you feel like you've accomplished some headway in that area? Yeah.
I've improved a lot. There's always room for improvement, and, and improvement ends the day you are pushing up daisies. But so yes, I think first of all, I've even my daughter's noticed it, that I've become more patient. Every once in a while, we all have things, and I think one of the biggest things is I've noticed, and I deviated it for a while. Like after the kids got out of school, I quit meditating for a while. And then, so I interrupted my routine, and I sort of saw where I backslid. So I started doing that all again. But I feel like I'm more patient. I listen to people more. And I think it allowed me to be a better leader, because a leader needs to respect the people. And at the same time, he needs to be able to lead and not feel bad if he expresses what he wants and it offends somebody. So I think I've made improvement. There's still things I want to improve, but overall, I would say I'm about 95% better.
Yeah.
Maybe 80% better, somewhere in there. I mean, I've got a ways to go. I'm not going to sit there, but I'm a lot better than where I was, more confident, more peaceful. Before there, and it's one of those things where everybody has a certain amount of road rage. Now I'm just kind of like, God bless them. I hope there's not a problem with them, and it gives you perspective that maybe they're having problems. Maybe, the guy just left or the lady just left and their spouse was abusive to them and they're in a bad mood. So just cut some people grace and be at peace.
Yeah. And you mentioned briefly the tapping.
Yes.
The EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. And that's one of the core pieces of the program. And I've been doing it and teaching it to people for 20 years, and I'm still amazed at how it works. So share your experience with EFT that we've done together and how you use it on your own.
Well, it's without saying what my background is, really, I have a background in a discipline and something that deals mainly in science. So when I started doing the tapping, I thought, well, this may be kind of weird, and I wasn't sure if it was really going to work. And I was actually shocked that how quickly it worked, and how that, there was one situation where I couldn't even talk about something because it was so traumatic. And after tapping, I can talk about it now, and it didn't faze me before, like where I didn't want to talk about it before and I would get really emotional. And the tapping did a couple things. One, it allowed me to talk about a situation where I didn't even mean to hurt somebody's feelings, but I did, just joking with them. And that instantly took away that pain and suffering. And then the other thing that I think is, over a period of time, you make a journal of about 90 things or 100 things where you feel that you were offending people or people offended you. And most of the time it was me. I felt like I offended somebody, but there was other things where people, and then you sort of tap it out and you talk about it and you repeat a sequence. And, like, yeah, this ain't going to work, whatever, this is crazy, but it does. And to the point where the past doesn't haunt me anymore. I don't think, in fact, I don't, my wife, I'd be in the shower, taking a shower, and I'd be reliving some post-traumatic moments of my discipline, typically, or not really childhood, but some other things. And I would talk to myself, and she's, what are you in the bathroom talking to yourself? Are you crazy? And it's like, that's how I used to control the stress. And with the tapping, that all went away. So I don't even do that anymore. And it's allowed me to think not about the past, but to go forward in the future and think about how I'm going to accomplish what I need to accomplish. And it really does work. And I can't explain it. I'm a scientist at heart. And I think it kind of uses Eastern medicine with the nerve system, sort of like, what is it called? Acupuncture and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we don't know everything in the scientific medical community of the Western. And so it works, and it can be very, repeating a sequence, and the way Don does it, I'm still not as good as him, but I laugh because it also makes you laugh. And it can actually, while you're doing it, the way Don does it, you can take a moment that seems so horrible and traumatic and serious to you. And after you get done, it just seems trivial. It's silly that I was so upset by that So I thought
Well,
it
and
was very,
that's it. That's interesting. You mentioned that, Austin, because that happens all the time. I mean, I've had people come in here with, just major traumas and heaviness. And while we're doing it, they start laughing. And just like you say, at the end of it, their thinking has changed about what happened. And the feeling is totally, I mean, I've had so many people that have been in traditional therapy for years or decades and medication, and they're used to heaviness and talking about it and, not feeling better. And then they come here and they say, this is kind of fun. It's like the trauma's gone and the bad feelings are gone and I'm laughing. I mean,
yep. And again, because it makes it humorous that, that you're just, the one, I don't want to get into it, but it was just talking about, teasing somebody that I, liked and respected, and they were having a bad day, and it set up a bad disaster. And when you look at it, it was really kind of funny, not really funny, but when you look at it, to be traumatized by something so trivial, it becomes humorous.
yeah. And that gets back to the basic principle of what I call the cycle of creation. Our beliefs determine how we think. Our thinkings determine the feeling. Feeling determines the behavior. Behavior determines the result. And it's just a, 24/7 thing. So when you can change your thinking, everything changes. And it's very, literally, it does not matter how traumatic or how big a deal something seems. If you understand the cycle of creation, and you accept the fact that your feelings are not caused by what happens, but they're caused by what you think about it, then it makes sense that no matter something, somebody could die, somebody could, you could lose all your money, you could get cut off in traffic, you could, anything that happens has different levels of feeling, but all the feelings are caused by a thought. And there's different ways you can change your thinking by praying. You can change your thinking by, you might see a billboard, or there's all kind of random ways to change your thinking, but there's also methodical ways to do it that are going to work every time. And you take the guesswork out of it. So
yeah, and it's interesting because, again, like the one thing you always said was, and I thought I was just kind of an oddball, but we all have negative thoughts that pop in our mind, and it's not that we generated them. That's how we all are. And so how you address that and how you think about it and control that, and you have to learn that, like discipline, we all have certain levels of discipline, and that's one where you have to control those thoughts and not let them dictate. And the other thing I was thinking about, you always tell me this is, and I didn't think about it until I was playing with my iPod and a Christmas song came on. And if you've ever noticed that we still listen to the same Christmas music our grandparents listened to, and new Christmas music is not it never takes on. So why is it that we're listening to Johnny Mathis, Frank Sinatra and all those people? Because when we're young, we hear that music and we associate happy thoughts with that music. So when you play it, it generates happy thoughts. And that's how it makes you realize is that your thought creates the emotion. And that's what I guess.
No, that's a great observation. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the coaching. Mm-hmm. So anybody can learn how to meditate. There's all kinds of ways to learn meditation, journaling. You can find books. I guess on your own, if you haven't had a lot of experience, it's like for me, I've spent 32 years on my own personal growth path. So, I've found books that, I've read thousands of books, so I can give people books that they may or may not ever find. But let's just say that on your own, a person can find some good books to read. They can find a way to learn EFT. So a person could find a ways to learn all these things. So how do you feel like it would be if you had these tools, but if you didn't have the coaching? Tell me how the coaching played into.
I laugh because I go back to that movie again where Billy Bob Thornton tells that guy, he goes, you can get all that self-help books you want because you're a loser. A loser is trying to cheat training a loser. And I know I'm not a loser, but it's funny because it's kind of honest. And I think the thing is that, and it's the problem we have in our society right now, is we're supposed to have online college courses. We're supposed to do all this stuff online. But the fact is you need a mentor. that's why we have priests. You need a priest as a mentor, somebody who's studied and they have years of it. And that's why I think a coach helps, because instead of a psychiatrist, it's a different relationship. You go to a psychiatrist and it's kind of like the definition of crazy. You keep repeating the same beat over and over. Well, that's all they do. And they haven't thought about it. Well, nobody gets better. Well, why is nobody getting better? Well, as a coach, somebody's directing you, and that's what you need. So not only do you need the direction, you can get the books and everything, but you need somebody with direction and somebody with experience. And, I'm a physician, and, sure, I can pick up a book and I can go read about a disease, but I've got to see it a few times. And that's why residents work 36 hours straight every other night, because you got to see this stuff in a short period of time, because if you've never seen it, you won't recognize it. And I think that's sort of the same thing. So somebody with experience has seen this and seen other people grow, and they know how to not manipulate, but know how to control and cultivate growth versus yourself, where you may not, because like a 12-week course, I feel like my growth was exponential versus if I had just done that, it may have taken me longer. So I think the coach is a tremendous catalyst in the growth process, because they're directing you, and they're directing you in a path where, if you have a good life coach like Don, they can see where you need to go. And like when we went over, and I don't want to discuss because I'm so embarrassed now and I look back, but what my goals were when we first met, and then afterwards I was like, holy shnikey, what was I thinking? And, and so you need somebody to hold you accountable too. And I mean, that's true. Whether it's a football coach or somebody, you need somebody who's going to discipline you. And there was one time I know where, you challenged me to do something, and I'd done everything, but I didn't want to quit talking to my wife for a period of time. And I was kind of fired up about it, but in the end I did it, and I was disciplined. But you need somebody to hold you accountable. And I think that the coach is important, because he's a catalyst in the promotion of your growth, but also holding you accountable. Whereas a psychiatrist, what do they hold you accountable for? They don't. And I'm picking on them a little bit, but they don't. You go in there and it's like, well, did you read the book? No. Well, because they're worried that you're going to go find another psychiatrist that's either going to give you a pill or just tell you to be happy. And, so when you pay for a coach, you're paying for somebody to say, what the heck's wrong with you? Listen to what I'm saying, be disciplined, read the books, do the journal, and they hold you accountable. And I think that's very important.
Well, and another piece of that is that, even though, we just have a 2-hour session once a week. I mean, I'm thinking about my clients. As you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking about, it's just I think any good coach or mentor is doing that, but it's like, you get 2 hours a week for a session, but that's just part of it.
And you're absolutely, and again, so when you go see a psychiatrist, come back next week, come back in a month, and then you're out the door, and I don't even know if they ever think about you again or pick up a book or think about you. But the other is true, is that by everything that you did, I've got to think every day about when I'm going to meet you Friday. Our session was Friday. So I got to make sure I get that book read. I got to make sure that I'm journaling, and I've got to make sure. So I'm constantly in the process of growing. So like if you go see a psychiatrist, okay, you walk out the door and boom, it's done. But with a life coach, you're responsible for, I think we had, was it 6 books? And I think I read a couple more.
I think, 5 or 6. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have to read those books, and you're doing journaling. And I found it was going back to my days of school where I was busy after getting the kids to bed at 9. I was reading from 9 to 11 at night and writing my journal and doing all this stuff. And it was actually enjoyable. And I felt like overall, it gave me a certain amount of peace too, in addition, but it makes you think, well, it's not like, well, I got to go to the doctor next week and he's going to ask me the same questions. This is actually, it makes you think about your life coach as well, and makes you think about what you need to get accomplished.
Well, and it's a collaborative thing. It's not like somebody comes here and I've got a magic wand. In other words, basically, Austin is responsible for every benefit he's gotten. I've got the tools and I can give the direction, but if he's not doing the stuff, nothing's going to happen.
Nope.
That's just the way it works. And, I think my experience has been, this program is not for everybody. Now, would anybody benefit from it? Yeah. And I think anybody would benefit from it, but a lot of people aren't going to do it, because most people want somebody to do something else for them. They want a pill. They want to, go get a massage or chiropractor where somebody's doing something to them or for them. On this type of journey, you got to do it yourself. And the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. I mean, I've done this with over 100 people, and people get results to different levels depending on how much they put into it. I mean, if people just come for 2 hours a week and they do a little bit during the week, yeah, they'll get some good benefit, but the more you do, the more benefits you get. And my hope is, and Austin, you can kind of tell me how you feel, but my hope is, like you say, life is a never-ending process and growth is a never-ending thing. So the 12-week program is structured to give a person exponential growth and clear off most of the past trauma and give them tools going forward to use for the rest of their life. I've had people that have been in traditional therapy for 10, 15, 20 years and told me that they got more benefit in 3 months than all that other stuff. So, Austin, from your perspective, at this point, what do you think you will continue using on a regular basis?
Well, the first thing, what you said is something I want to reiterate is, it's kind of one time I had a job interview somewhere at a big highfalutin program. And my boss told me, he says, they put the pants on the same way you do, And so when I always think about that, because the point being is, it doesn't matter whether you went to Harvard or you went to Indiana University. It's not where you go, but it's what you put into what he was trying to say. And so the point being is, what you get out is what you put into it. And so that's very important. And I remember my wife is really the catalyst that started it, because she said, well, you've never done anything to help yourself. And that's not true. I went into the traditional, I call them psychiatrists and psychologists. And it was very unsatisfying, but because, it was the same thing. You go there a week, you talk about something happened, but nothing got accomplished. And it's really like they weren't participating. They're just listening to you, probably thinking about when they're going to the golf course or whatever. And so for this, the first thing I just want to reiterate is, you put into it, you get out of it. So the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And so, my wife, by pointing that, I was like, you're right. What have I done? What have I really done? So I wanted to find somebody that was going to make it be aggressive. And that's what I did. And I think how I'm going to do it, and I think probably every maybe every quarter or every 6 months, just reconnect with Don for about a month and see what's going on and get more growth, because he's got a lot of good books. But what I really found was, when my kids graduated, or when kids got out of school, I did it for a few weeks, and then I took a couple weeks off because I started sleeping later and getting up at 4:30. But I'm going to go back to that 4:30 routine where I meditate and I journal. I think those are the two biggest things that help me, because the meditation, again, it's not like you're at this bliss of just being at peace, but it lets you sort of organize your thoughts for the morning and lets you have a certain level of peace, but it focuses you, and whatever pops into your mind, if you're trying to just think about one thing versus being scattered all over the place like an ADHD kid like me, then that gives you a process. And the journaling will surprise you. You'll just start writing, and the flow of conscious will allow you to express things that you never thought about before. And I had some great revelation from that. And then my goal is to try to read a book, at least 2 books a month on some type of growth, and go to that. And then that's where it at. And I think the other thing I think one thing we didn't touch on, and I think I didn't understand it at first. And I think my goals reflected my lack of understanding it. But, and I'm not going to use the correct terminology, but, living from how do you say living?
Living from the inside out.
Yes. And what it really is you got to heal yourself and be spiritually on a growth track spiritually. And that's the real ultimate goal, is to just be in that spiritual growth and living to be honest with yourself and other people. And I think that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. So I greatly appreciate the feedback, and any, and we talk, in addition to these things, we talked about a lot of other stuff. I mean, we talked about congruence, what's your priority list, integrity. There's a lot of other stuff. We just touched on kind of some of the main points.
The congruency, I think, is another important thing. I mean, it's like, nobody, this is, I mean, I would just recommend it to anybody, and again, I think if you got to go in there, you got to want the right frame of mind. But I think the other big thing is like congruence, like what you're referring to. Well, like you can sit there and say, my wife is the most important thing, and you may believe it, but if your actions don't support that, then you're incongruent and it causes turmoil. So if you truly believe it, and you want your wife to be the most important thing, then you got to drop the other things that you're trying to do. And so, and that's not to say we're bad people. It's just that life is pulling you in 50 different directions. So really by being congruent, it forces you to prioritize and stay true to your priorities.
And do you remember, we don't need to get into it specifically.
I know,
but
I'm
do you remember?
I remember.
No, I'm saying we don't have to get into the details, but you remember when I first asked you your priorities and then how they changed. It's something 95.
Well, before they were childish, I thought they seemed pretty appropriate. And then
Right.
afterwards, it made me realize that the real priority is to be spiritually on a growth pattern, and everybody has a different view of whatever spirituality is. I believe in Christ, but the point being is that you've got to go down that path. And by living from that means you're not living to impress other people. You're living to what's inside you and to make yourself a better person overall, versus like in the world we're living right now, everything seems to be external. The Kim Kardashians, the look at me, look at this, and all the fakeness, when really what we need to be is sincere and honest, not only with other people, but with ourselves.
Well, and what I found going back to priorities and congruence, in working with many different people over 20 years, I found that probably 95% of the people have never really focused on their priorities and have never really thought about being congruent. And so, and then even, when people are doing this program, and I always ask them, okay, what are your priorities? 90% of the people are just like you, Austin. They just think of stuff that they think is important. But then once we get into it, they really realize that it's all external stuff. And so it's just a process. And
and I think, the one thing is by, blocking the generational curse for me is to make sure my kids don't go down the same path. And I think one of the biggest things is being honest with yourself. And like I was just talking to my dad and I was totally shocked. And I think it's what causes a lot of midlife crisis is we go through life and we keep getting farther away from where we wanted to be to start with, whatever.
Right.
Then you wake up one day and you're not the person that you wanted to be, and you haven't lived or done anything that you truly wanted to do because you're trying to make everybody else happy. And I don't like the word authentic, because to me, that's more of a, something, but I think being more sincere with yourself. And I think that's one thing you pointed out that I realized about myself was you start going down a path of trying to make everybody else happy or doing what society wants us to do versus what we want to do. And I think that to be truly happy, you just have to be honest with yourself and say, well, really, what do I want to be? Do I want to be, do I want to run a business like my dad owned a company, or does he wanted to be a journalist, and write for a newspaper? So we all have things we want to do in life, and then we let people deflect us down a different path.
Well, and that's a great point that people don't think about. It's like if you're going, say you're at one point and you have another point that's 1,000 miles away that you want to get to. And it's like if you go in a straight line, eventually you'll get to that point. But if you're just a half a degree off line, the further you travel, after you've gone 1,000 miles, a half degree off, you may be hundreds of miles away from. So that's a good point. The further we go along in life, we get further and further from where we really want to be. So, well, any closing thoughts? I appreciate
No, I would recommend it to everybody. I just think if you're going to do it, you got to be dedicated to doing it and to listen and be open-minded. Like you say, you don't have to believe everything I say, but just think about it, and I think that that's a big thing. And I think it's a course that when my daughters get a little bit older, I'm going to get them involved in it because I want them to think a different way than society and the rest of the world wants us to think, so they can be free from a lot of what goes on.
Yeah, and that's a good point. What I say is, don't believe anything that I say. Be open to everything and have your own experiences. That,
Yep.
because I'm not a guru and I don't know everything, but I do know a lot of stuff that's useful for, and like you said, everybody thinks that the tapping is silly. I mean, that's, it's normal. I mean, who would think that something like this could relieve a major trauma? I mean, but it does. So,
Well, I firmly believe it.
all right, I'm gonna close the recording and then we can stay on for